Welcome to the Map Forward podcast, everybody. I'm Lee Safar. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by FAFCoffees in Brazil. If you're looking for some amazing Brazilian coffees that are sustainably produced, head to fafbrazil.com or contact felipecroce at felipecroce@fafcoffees.com. Today on the Map Forward podcast, we have some amazing guests with us, Felix Tran and Sam Capel. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
You are a portion of Coffee at Large.
Yeah, that's correct. We're like half of it.
50%.
50%.
We can do math.
50% of Coffee at Large.
Yeah, brilliant. That is true.
It is really great to have you here. I've been really excited about having this conversation. I feel like what you guys are working on right now with this movement that you're creating is so much about what Map It Forward is in alignment with. So welcome. I'm excited to have this discussion with you. You guys are based up in Seattle.
That's right.
And I guess right from the get-go, I would love to invite you to talk to us about how Coffee at Large came about.
Right. Do you want me to talk about it?
Please.
Okay. So do you want me to tell the whole spiel?
Yeah, you can just talk.
Yeah. Look, we're here for a couple of hours.
Okay, awesome. So it started off with Sam. So Sam was going to move like end of July, beginning of August. And we were like, the Ballard team was like, do we want to stay without Sam or do we want to leave? And I honestly was contemplating like maybe I can survive without Sam at Ballard.
To give some context just there. We're talking about Slate Coffee in Seattle.
Yeah.
And how many stores?
There's 5, I think.
Yeah,
there's 1 in Pioneer Square. No, there's 2 in Pioneer Square. There's 1 in the Ballard neighborhood. There's 1 in the Facebook headquarters, and there's 1 in the University District.
By the way, everybody asks us if the Facebook location is online. And that's after this.
That's a great question. Fuck me.
Actually, they don't even ask. They all just assume it's online.
Yeah, they're like, so you have 4 retail stores. I'm like, I listed 5, but...
Oh, hashtag coffee people. What a delight. And for clarification, Slate Coffee have been contacted. They have been made aware that we're having this conversation. They have been invited to have an episode of themselves so that we can have a balanced discussion. I've been contacting them for a couple of weeks now, and we have heard zero nothing. I've contacted them through their Instagram and as well as their email. Their email has been disabled.
The press email?
The info email, the one that you can use during from their Instagram that just keeps bouncing back. So Slate Coffee, if you would like to come on and have a conversation, I promise you I'm not here to make anyone look like an asshole. I just want to hear, like, everybody just wants to have an open discussion.
Yeah.
Which is only fair. I think that the worst thing that Slate can do right now is say nothing. But anyway, this is not about Slate. This is about you guys. So go ahead.
Yeah. So all of us, there are 4 folks at the Slate Ballard location, me, Sam, Jason, and Rachel. So the folks at Coffee at Large. And then Sam approached us one day and she's like, yo, do you guys want to walk out? And we're like, yeah, we do. Oh yeah, that's kind of like
exactly with those facial expressions and the head turns and absolutely
each and every one of us did those really intense
faces.
Well, so we plan to. Do you want to talk about that too? Like how we're supposed to?
Yeah. So we'd been planning to do it middle of July. We all came into the coffee shop sort of under different expectations of what we would be experiencing there. You take a huge pay cut to work at Slate. You can work for much less respected coffee companies for a lot more money and a lot less work and a lot less expectation. But we all sort of took those jobs because we wanted to learn and we wanted to experience what it was like working for this company with great coffee, great product, great people, great training. And when we got there, we were rudely shocked to experience something very different, and had watched it happen to, I mean, I worked at Slate for almost 2 years. I'd watched it happen to everybody who came in. I was one of the longest standing members. I'd say there are maybe 7 other people in the entire company who had been there longer than me.
Yeah.
That's maybe more than there actually were. So we'd watch this happen to passionate person after passionate person come in, really excited, and then sort of be burned and either definitely leave Slate, but often leave the coffee industry, which is very heartbreaking to me because I love coffee. I love the craft coffee. And seeing a whole bunch of little me's come in and then not be treated well and then be sent out. We didn't want that to keep happening. So that's why we decided to go with the walkout. We wanted to have the public, or at least my main goal was to get onto the barista communities. There's the Seattle Baristas Guild, and then there's Seattle Indie Coffee, and they're the 2 places where baristas look in Seattle where they want to work. So I thought if we can just get on there, then people will be informed if they're coming after us. That's a statement.
What do you mean by you wanted to get onto the barista communities?
Oh, we just wanted to have visibility. With our walkout, we wanted
with the movement.
At least be viewable by people who pay attention to the coffee industry.
Yeah. When we were putting Coffee at Large together, we weren't expecting like a huge following. We were expecting maybe like 200 followers at the most. Like, oh my God.
Surprise!
Much forward to 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. So like, we were just like, I think that we're all really passionate about this. We want to bring justice to the folks who have been wronged by Slate, and bring light to all of the issues that have gone on in the company. And so it's like, maybe people will be interested. But then like that shit like snowballed so hard and so fast. And we're like, whoa, so this is a thing that people resonate with and actually like understand and feel also in their communities, which is kind of sad at the same time, but also really cool that we were able to give them a voice. That's been great.
This isn't new. You get that, right? Like you guys are creating a new movement, but the reason it's resonating with everyone so much is because this is not like a new thing that's happening in the coffee industry.
Yeah.
Which is so shitty. And it happens all over the world.
Yeah. I've heard from Vietnam, we've heard from Berlin. Yeah. We've heard like
Australia, I'm sure.
Definitely Australia. Yeah. But all sorts of places all over the world where it's pretty crazy.
Right. And it's not we don't want it to be an us versus them kind of problem. Like this is not it's the barista's fault or it's the employer's fault. Right. It needs to be something that both sides look at. And we'll unpack as we go down the track, but let's understand more of like the situation. So you guys were planning to do it on, was it the 20th of July or something?
Yeah. Whoa, like 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, and it was 2 weeks ago or something, wasn't it?
Labeled in my phone as #Slegsit.
Slegsit, okay.
It's like Slate and Exit.
Loved it.
So good.
Slegsit. Okay.
Anyway.
So the idea was to create a movement and nobody wants, I mean, I remember when I watched this unfold, my gut reaction was, okay, this isn't a bunch of little assholes that are trying to, they didn't get enough hugs when they were a kid, so they're just trying to be little pricks about this. There are situations I have seen happen online where that is absolutely the situation. Yeah. But this was not that. And Felix, I spoke to you about this when we were on the phone. I sat back and watched for a little while to see how you guys handled it. And it became very clear from the get-go that you weren't being little assholes about this. You had a genuine, from what I could see. And this is my opinion. I'm not saying anything beyond my own opinion, okay? For anyone who's going to send me a fucking email threatening legal action. But what I'm saying is, like, I looked at what was going on and I didn't want to pay attention to the comments because that just looked like a fucking shitstorm.
Yeah, there were a lot of comments. There were a lot.
But it became apparent in the way that you were communicating the situation, both online and to your customers from the letter that you put on the door, that this was something that you had considered and you weren't doing lightly. You understood that there were going to be some ramifications from this.
Yeah.
So tell me about the thought process that goes behind something like this, because I can't imagine any of it was done lightly.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the first day that we all met, I had no idea what was happening. I was so confused. And I remember walking out of that meeting and pulling, I think, Sam and Rachel aside and being like, yo, I don't know what's going on. Like, what's going on right now? Like, what are we doing? And then it reassured me when Sam and Rachel, like, you know what? We're all like trying to figure it out together. Like, none of us have done this before. So that was really great. And I think Sam is honestly like really great at communicating to the public, and she like spearheaded that. We just did like a bunch of projects to help support her in being able to communicate that specific message. I don't know, like I mostly curated like the social media content and like the Instagram and like interacted with the folks who were commenting and messaging, whereas Sam, Rachel, and Jason all helped curate like posts to the public where we're making like public statements and stuff, which is really great.
You should look, like, all of our search histories are like how to be sued for libel, how to be sued for slander.
It's why I have alleged in everything that I've talked about in all of this. So the alleged mistreatment of their staff by Slate Coffee, the alleged this and the alleged that, because, you know, again, that's why I wanted Slate to have the opportunity to come on here and have the conversation with us, because, you know, we're not here saying we need you to admit what you've done wrong. That's not what this is about. This is about, hey, listen, like everyone's learning every fucking day. Like we all fuck up. We all fuck up. It's a different story if you know that you're fucking up and don't try and do things to grow from that, and don't show up for the conversation.
And a lot of we were very intentional, especially when speaking to the media, as often as possible. Actually, we never said names. The media, like, we would say ownership or upper management, and then they would do their own research. We had no intention of. I believe that everybody has the ability to change. Right. So we had, even though there were a lot of issues with people in upper management, we don't want to stop them from being able to make that change and find other jobs, and then also have an impact on their community. So we were very intentional. It was very difficult to not let our personal, we have been very angry at some of the treatment of ourselves and our other people we've worked with, and not letting that anger come through and show through was a lot of work and a lot of intentionality for sure.
Can I just offer my kudos to you there, because that was the difference between what made me realize that you guys weren't being little assholes and the fact that you were being really mature about the approach that you took to this. Because yes, you know, in every kind of movement, there's our personal feelings about how we feel about something, but then there's the actual movement. And I could really see a very clear maturity. And I hope that doesn't sound condescending in any way. I'm not trying to make it sound condescending. What I'm trying to do is congratulate you on separating yourselves out from people who are just trying to make noise, and people actually trying to make a difference and stand for something with integrity and with a real potentiality for change.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying. Because you definitely see the difference in people who are trying to create movements that are all about emotion versus movements that are all about change.
Although I feel like it's okay to be a bit emotional. I've been to a lot of events where there are a lot of frustrations, and it's kind of difficult. Like, I guess I wouldn't have done this if I didn't know that people were very frustrated and very upset. And I've been inspired by so many people who like use their emotions to create really, really awesome like projects and awesome events. So it's like, although I understand like why we would want to like focus on change, but I can also understand why someone would start something out of emotion, because it's a lot and it's really hard to like endure all this pain and just like forgive a person.
Yeah.
A lot of growth, but it's like that's a lot of trauma that you have to process and go through. So I do understand why people create like events and like projects and stuff out of emotion and anger.
And this has been a really great conversation we've been having at Coffee at Large as well, because 50% of us are very much the movement comes first. We'll put aside our emotion and deal with that separately.
Mhm.
And then 50% of us are definitely like, yes, but we need to have that anger driving us and moving us forward to
Great balance.
It's fantastic. It is so difficult for me because I am so
Emotional.
the end justifies everything. You know, and Felix is so like passionate about expressing, so it's been great.
Yeah,
healthy.
I think it's like I think it is healthy to be able to express emotion, but also be like, I understand both sides, because that's like what it boils down to. We do understand both sides, but we're still like hurt and like feel things, you know?
Absolutely. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of the times when you're driven purely by and fueled purely by emotion rather than action, you end up not getting anything done.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And that's what I want to congratulate you on. For whatever it's worth, I definitely could see through the way that you were conducting yourself that you were highly passionate about this. And that's a really powerful emotion. And it's an emotion that you can't fake.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those emotions that it's the epitome of authenticity. You know when someone's talking shit and when they're not, based on their passion, right?
Yeah,
and it became very clear very quickly that you weren't staging a walkout because you wanted attention.
Yeah.
You wanted the focus to be on the movement, rather than the focus to be on you becoming Insta famous.
Yeah, genuinely. I mean, we didn't even think we'd get like Insta.
And it was calculated because I like getting jobs in my future. I really do enjoy making money. And so knowing that we were doing a walkout, something to get attention, was calculated. Like, we understood that it also might stop us from getting jobs.
Well, yeah, there are ramifications, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So no, attention was not the goal.
I don't know.
We were like, should we do this anonymously? So that
yeah, but see, even that, like, I was flipping all of this in my mind. Why didn't they do this anonymously? Like, how could they have done it in different ways? I really do think you did this the best possible way it could have been done.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that is because, one, you clearly knew that this was something that was prevalent, right? You'd experienced it authentically. And at the same time, you weren't sitting there trying to get people to give you a cuddle and say, there, it'll be all right.
Yeah.
What you were trying to do is say, hey, listen, it's fucking enough.
Yeah.
That it's time to start a different conversation. And again, my hat is off to all four of you for having the courage to do something like this. And I really hope Slate comes to the table and has the conversation, because it's important for other employers to understand that the only way we grow is by discussing and not hiding from these kinds of things. So let's unpack what led to you taking what could be perceived as extreme measures, but what I'm suspecting is people won't see these as extreme measures when they see what they're in response to.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, when it happened, I felt like this was an appropriate response to all of the accumulated experiences at Slate, honestly. I've only worked there for a year, or I only worked there for a year, and within that year, I've met so many people, and I personally, in order to cope, chose to turn like a blind eye to people's like trauma and what they experience with the owners, because I personally didn't have to experience it. But then I realized it's because Sam was blocking all of the punches for me, and that like broke my heart. because it's like a lot to deal with that kind of like hurt and trauma and like aggression, like unneeded aggression. And that's for me what really inspired me to keep going with Coffee at Large, and why I wanted to like absolutely leave. Because if it weren't for Sam, probably I would probably try to like stick Slate out and just like pretend that like all of these bad things didn't happen. I don't know. It's just like really hard to watch people that you love and really care about and watch so many talented baristas like quit and like or get fired, and it's like they're being nothing but like good, genuine people. So yeah, that was really hard.
So our situation was a little different than most other employees at Slate. We worked at the Ballard location, which was very isolated. We almost never had to see management. The only time we had to communicate with them until the last few months was when we didn't have money and needed to be paid. That was sort of when like, hey, when are we getting our paychecks would start happening. But
How late was the paychecks?
It depends on who you're talking to. One person just got their paychecks. When did they quit?
Which person are we talking about?
We're not.
Just use an initial, or just write it in the air on with
Or M.
Oh, did they get there?
Yeah, they did. I saw them yesterday.
Oh,
So
no way.
yeah, now yeah.
That's
anyway,
hot news.
Months and months they were missing 3 paychecks. So that one took very, very long time, and this was 3 or 4 months after they quit. They still were looking for them, and I just found out yesterday that they got them. So that took forever. But when everyone would be missing a paycheck, it would be, you know, it would be Friday, and then we'd get the text messages coming in from employees being like, hey, we're getting paid today. And then we'd say, you might get paid next week, or there would be some reason sometime.
Which we should point out is illegal in this country. It's illegal in the States. You have to pay your staff on time.
Yeah. Dude, I had no idea. It just became so normalized in my like career, or in my like at the time I was at Slate. It was like, oh yeah, like sometimes we get our paychecks like late. Like new people would ask me like, does this always happen? I'm like, yeah, it's fine, right?
Yeah, you
like,
definitely pay.
No.
Wait for like a week after payday before you have any commitments.
Yeah.
But,
Wow.
I was looking for one of my paychecks from January to March, middle of March. It was a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting to get an understanding of like, this isn't like you got paid a day late. We're talking a couple of months in that situation.
But for some people, yes.
Yeah.
Other
For some people,
like when it would happen on a mass scale, it would be a couple of days, maybe 3 or 4 days.
Like they would try to deposit it Saturday, but you wouldn't get it until like Monday because Sunday was like
right.
closed. So,
but then sometimes you'd wait for your direct deposit, and then you'd say, hey, where's the money? And they'd say, oh, it was delivered in check form to cafes. Yeah. But it wouldn't always be delivered to your cafe. Yeah. Some people would work at one location, and then they'd later be told that their check had showed up at a different location. Yeah. So.
That kind of fuckery is not okay, though. Like, if there's one thing that cafe owners should be doing, all business owners should be doing, is you've got to have money to pay your staff and pay your staff on time, because if they don't get paid on time, they end up having to pay late fees on rent and car payments and all that kind of stuff. It's not okay. Like, if you can't afford to have the number of employees that you have, you need to scale back, or you need to figure out how to make it happen, how to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So there's one situation that we've unpacked. So people weren't getting paid on time. It sounds like, Sam, you were, as the manager, protecting people and shielding people from a lot of stuff, as Felix was saying. What was the experience like for you?
It was mixed, because working at the original location, the flagship store of a really well-respected coffee company, comes with its perks. Like, you get all the pride, and you get to work during SCA. All of the people from all over the world would come to our location. You know, so that kind of experience, getting to work with customers who love coffee, getting to talk about coffee all day, that part was a pure joy. And if we had never had to hear from management, we probably could have dealt with it for a long time. Yeah. There was a recent, maybe in the last 6 months, hiring of 2 upper management people that started making the environment very, very hostile.
These were new people?
Yes, new people.
Yeah. one person got hired around SCA on the East Coast, and then the other person got hired around like 6 to 8 months ago.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, maybe like a little less than a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they were moved up to management very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, very surprisingly to all of us who had met this person, and then the other person was very well spoken, so that was not unexpected. And the way they would deal with people was incredibly unpleasant and unkind, and disrespectful. And one of the one who's very well spoken would be very nice to your face and then sort of undercut you from behind.
Yeah.
And so we started noticing the environment get very sour towards us, and you wouldn't know why.
When you say us, do you mean at the Ballard
Yeah.
location
And
specifically?
staff. Like, so a lot of the staff will go and work. Ballard, we mostly stay just our crew, but then our crew will also go and cover shifts at other locations.
Okay.
So the conversation was being had everywhere.
Yeah.
That these people were incredibly difficult to deal with and were making the environment very difficult to stay in. Anybody that we knew were all looking for other jobs at the same time.
Yeah. I worked at all of the locations, or I guess all of them except for the university location, and everyone I spoke to was ready to bounce. Yeah.
And what was the reasoning? Like, did everyone was it particular people that they weren't, like did the culture change when two new people came into the business? Was Slate always like this, in your opinion?
Slate's always had issues.
Yeah.
The culture has made a massive shift in the last 6 months or so. With taking on, creating a sister company called Rainier Coffee, where they do dark roast for less elevated companies, perhaps.
Like second wave coffee shops.
Second way. So yeah, for older people to drink.
It has its place. So with the adjustment there, and then trying to, I believe the term is sexy coffee is what they've coined for what Slate was moving into.
Yeah.
So rebranding.
Was that, hold on, wait, was that actually put in the, was
That
it spoken?
is- Yeah.
Like,
And that's
make
actually
coffee
on the
sexy.
wall at one of our locations.
Oh my gosh, yeah, at the Facebook one, right?
Yeah.
In chalk, yeah.
Yeah, it's so
Great.
good. Anyway, so rebranding and definitely going away from the actual coffee and moving into the look of the coffee. So
Yeah.
so as that moved, then so I was the retail trainer, and I was teaching virology and delving into the weird and wonderful art and science of coffee. So that's sort of what.
And that only happened at Ballard, or were you?
No, I trained all staff.
Okay, so you were technically the trainer, or were you a manager?
I was the trainer, the retail retail training manager for all locations, and then I also managed the Ballard store.
Okay, great. So thank you.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
worries. So eventually they stopped. I didn't train everyone because eventually they stopped sending me trainees when they decided that virology was less important than
Sexy cranes.
sexy cranes.
I was
Sorry,
saying-
no, that's rude.
Wait, no, storks.
So yeah, we
What's
can't
the
remember.
bird?
I
I don't know.
Anyway,
Okay,
so
I can't believe that they let that be a thing. Was that really a thing of the culture?
So
the sexy coffee thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
So
How did that feel?
without us being told, we came into Slate. Slate was Slate. It was, you start from the beginning, the blank slate. We're creating a new kind of coffee, a new kind of culture, and that's what we all signed on for. And when they started rebranding, they didn't really tell us that that's not what we were doing anymore.
Mhm.
So they changed, especially my job description, where I'd been, I was supposed to be teaching virology and supposed to be innovating and supposed to be doing what Slate always did. And then eventually I was told off for not teaching people how to make vanilla lattes. Well, we don't carry vanilla at my location, so that would have been a little bit difficult.
Yeah. So yeah, and also I don't know, you can make a vanilla latte easily. Do you need to be trained?
I mean, if we hire people with experience, you'd think that. Anyway, so that's very on the level, but underneath there was just a lot of meanness, and there was I never had a positive thing said about me by the management.
Yeah.
Except when my customers would go into the management and tell them, and then they'd tell me what my customers had said. But mostly there was just a lot of negative memos all the time saying that everyone was doing a bad job. And When anyone would try to, we saw a group message come through saying, hey, people are coming in looking for this thing that we have posted on the signboard. We don't actually have that thing. Can we change it? And this person was trying to, I don't know, make a better representation of the coffee shop. And the reply to that memo was, we can't change that without blah blah's permission, but see the side work task if you're bored. You know, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it was condescending,
Very.
kind of derogatory kind of communication. So it sounds like there was definitely communication issues with the way that management was talking to, for lack of a better term, subordinates.
Yeah.
What was the culture like before this last 6 months?
So each individual cafe was fine. Like, I used to work at when I first started Slate, I worked at all of the locations. University was so like close, kind of like family-like, kind of where, you know, you're just in there to do your job, you're in there to leave. And Ballard was also very close because there's only like 3 or 4 people who work there. And then before we walked out, the entire uni staff actually quit. And so they've been always struggling with like keeping people staffed.
The whole team quit in one go?
Yeah, well, not in one go, like periodically, like
okay,
person would leave around the same time, and
So
within
like
a month they were all gone.
an OG staff, the OG staff had gone.
Yeah. And before that, it was like everyone was fine, like in their like individual little like bubbles.
Because again, communication was non-existent.
Yeah.
So we never heard from the management, so it never really bothered us unless we were looking for money.
Yeah, unless we were looking for paychecks.
So you develop, and that happens, like if management gets out of the way, an organic culture is going to establish itself, a leader's going to step forward and take leadership, and, you know, that happens a lot. I'm not a fan of that. I think that employers should be establishing a culture within their own workplace that employees need to either figure out if they're in alignment with those values or not. And then, you know, that sounds like a healthy kind of work environment. It seems.
Yeah.
But the other kind is survivable. We were surviving.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Right. But it's also not fair. Do you agree?
Yeah. Like not fair to like go into survival mode.
Yeah, it's not fair to put you in a situation where you have to turn up to work and keep somebody else's business afloat without any guidance, without any leadership, without any support. That's not fair.
That is difficult. When I was hired on, I was, you know, told I would be told how to run the shop. And other than giving me a very quick intro on how to use the scheduling app, I was given nothing. So I had to, you know, call around and find out who delivers our milk, and call around and find out, you know, how do we, you know, do we order things from a restaurant store or do we get things from Amazon? And I still don't really know. So I just sort of winged it the entire time.
Yeah.
I was running the store.
You're doing great.
Thanks.
We had
But you just have to figure it out.
Yeah. And as a business owner, that's a shitty way to run a business. Like,
it's an expensive way to run.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean. You said it a little more eloquently than me, but it's a shitty way to run a business, because what ends up happening is you end up with not enough money to pay your staff because your spending is out of control.
Yeah.
And I asked for a budget, by the way. That was the first thing I asked for when I started managing the store, and they said they would get it to me by the next week. Fast forward a year later,
no budget still.
So let's unpack this a little further. How could they have made it? How could they have showed up in a way that made you feel more supported?
This is a great question. This is what we want with our organization to start communicating to stores. It is not hard to pay employees low wages and have them want to work for you. A teeny bit of respect, a teeny bit of communication, a little bit of positive affirmation, and you've got people for forever. I mean, it's really not that difficult to say something nice to people.
Yeah. I mean, by doing that, you're making people feel seen and feel heard and feel like loved. Like, you know, when Sam would say, "Good job, your bar looks great," I'm like, oh, I can handle sleep for another week, you know? So it's like, I don't know, like people want to feel seen and heard and loved. And we're at work for like 8 hours a day. Like, I would want some affirmation at work if I'm there most of my life.
And Slate had the resources as well to do that and to provide training even. I mean, people will work for low wages if they can be trained. Like, we had a trainer, and half the time I would be just researching coffee because they forget to send me anyone, you know? It's not that we didn't have the ability to make people feel seen.
Yeah.
I guess I would rather take affirmation. Felix, as you put it there, affirmation is a really great thing, but what's really necessary is appreciation.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
That's real.
You know, it's in the culture that we've tried to establish at Elixir, I go through this whole like presentation with staff about what do we actually mean by the culture that we have at Elixir. And when I was putting it together, I was thinking, well, how do I want people to treat each other? How do I want to be treated? How do I want them to feel treated? I want people to feel appreciated.
Yeah.
I want people to feel heard. I want people to feel that they have a voice. I want people to feel confidence so that they see an issue and feel confident to speak up about it. I also want them to feel confident about ideas that they could share.
Yeah, that's true too. I think providing a space where people can like grow professionally and personally and be able to express themselves, I think that's what anyone would ever want in a cafe, to be able to be proud of your product, but also proud of yourself for like being a part of this like company or being a part of like this team. You know, that's like the dream. And that's what everyone, I don't know, I feel like that's what most baristas pursue, like a place where they can feel like they can grow.
Do you feel that the absenteeism of leadership as you experienced it is what left the gate open for a lack of feeling appreciated by the people that own the company?
I genuinely feel like they probably didn't appreciate a lot of us.
Okay.
Because there wasn't a lot of respect for a lot of the employees that were working there. That's just from like my observation. I feel like not only the owners at Slate, but owners in general see baristas in that position as like expendable, and it's like, whatever, we'll just like replace their position with another barista who wants to work there. And especially because Slate has like a name, they were like definitely on that. They're like, whatever, we'll just hire another barista. It's fine. Like, it's the industry. Like, people come and go all the time.
I mean, we have one person's story posted on our account where they needed further training. Mm-hmm. They didn't, weigh in time their pour overs, which is a big deal to me. And I was like, I will bring them in. But the owner went in and just let them go because the owner didn't want to pursue that training.
Yeah.
You can just get someone else who can do their job.
Yeah,
just as easily.
They're like, if they're not doing a good job, like, let's just let them go and find a new person. And it's just like, these are people. Like, these are people who are trying to like pay their bills. And when you hire someone, you're choosing to invest your time and like money into this person, you know? Like, that's how I see it. Like, when I get hired, I'm like, wow, this person like really cares about me and wants me to be a part of their team. How can I like grow, and what resources can they give me to be a better part of this team? So yeah, that's just how I see it.
I hear you on that, and I want to go back to something that you were saying, Sam, about people will work for low wages. I want to challenge you a little bit on that, because I would like people to stop fucking paying low wages.
Yeah, no, we agree with that.
Right,
100%.
but we're in Seattle. The wages
right
aren't that low here.
50, is it at 15 yet?
15 minimum, yes.
Yes, right.
So, yeah, I would be scared to get into the wage discussion because Seattle is quite high.
No, I mean, let's not be scared of it, because none of us are experts on anything, and who better to be having the discussion than people that are in the industry and are actually affected by this stuff. I'm an employer. You guys are employees. I've been an employee, and we need to unpack it. We need to talk about what it feels like to be paid minimum wage.
I think what Sam meant is that, like, honestly, it doesn't take much for people to feel appreciated. Because at Slate, we took massive pay cuts. Like, I know people who work at other coffee shops and make $10 to $12 more than I did at Slate. Like, and we still work there, and there were still a lot of people who applied to Slate. So let's say that Slate was still paying what they were paying. They were paying me like $12 an hour plus like a few dollars in tips. So if I felt appreciated and loved, and they were like, "Oh my God, Felix, you're doing so good," I honestly would have stayed much
Right.
longer, which isn't okay, but that's what we're saying. Like people will still apply to Slate at such a low wage, and if they felt appreciated, they would have stayed much longer.
So I don't mean coffee companies should pay people less. I'm just saying if small companies that don't have a lot of money,
You can find employees as long as you appreciate them.
You can find ways to treat your employees that will keep them around.
I call them life currencies.
Yes. Ooh, please continue.
Yeah. So life currencies are the intangible currencies that make people feel wealthy, right? So my life currencies are peace of mind, flow, growth, purpose, freedom, connectedness, and clarity. And I want to build wealth in those 7 things in my life, right? So I view money as a resource rather than as a currency.
Yeah.
And so those 7 currencies are also currencies in both Map It Forward and in Elixir. And so when somebody gets onboarded into either of those 2 companies, we talk about those kinds of things. But then we further go on to talk about things like, well, let's go about the process of defining.
Really quick in the corner over here.
Sorry?
I need to cough.
I thought she said I need to go pee. Sorry, I thought he said I need to go pee in the corner real quick. I'm like, what?
Sorry, please continue. This is very interesting.
I was like, I have a cough and I can't hold it in. Like, I'm gonna die.
So then we go about the business of sitting down with each person that comes into Elixir or Map It Forward, and we work on identifying what their personal life currencies are, so that when it comes time to say thank you in a grandiose way, instead of paying someone with money, we build their wealth in their life currencies. So, for example, a previous employee of mine in Australia was a father who was going through a lot of transitions in their life, both physically, transitioning from being a woman to being a man, and transitioning careers, and transitioning having a child for like everything changing all at once. Right. So when he was working for me, we sat down and we talked about life currencies, and I said, so what's valuable to you? What would make you feel wealthy? And he said, time.
Yeah.
And so come the end of the year, I wanted to reward his commitment to the company and to say thank you. And so I asked him, how can we give you back some time every week? And he said, if you could pay for a laundry service, that would be awesome. Like, I don't care how much, even if it's just for a week's worth of laundry, that would be amazing. And so I wanted to give a $500 bonus. And so I said, go and spend $500 on laundry and send me the bill.
Amazing.
And that bought a good couple of months worth of a laundry service for him and his family. And the thing is, it forces, like, if I give him $500, he's going to go and put it towards a bill. Because, it's always easier to pay off a bill than it is to actually reward yourself with the time. And so this is why it's so important for me as an employer to reinforce and to show people how building your life currencies as a priority is really important. And so what ended up happening, he was forced into having that time back with his kid, and he got 3 hours a week back with his child, and he made a date to go, and instead, like, they would take the laundry, go and drop it off, spend the afternoon together, and he would pick up the laundry the next day.
So wholesome. I love it.
It's so great. And I felt like I'd cry like a fucking child every time he'd say thank you. I feel great because I see my employees feel happy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give them the $500 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But to hear that they're enriching their life, it's really not difficult. It's really, really not difficult. And as you say, Sam, it's the intangible things that make up the difference in pay that you're prepared to take so that you can have a well-rounded experience in a workplace.
Yeah.
I mean, when we were setting up our organization, Coffee at Large, we had a discussion, what would make you want to stay in this company and what would make you want to leave it?
Yeah.
And we're all, it was under the expectation that we were all volunteering time, so none of us were getting paid. And just things like all of us taking management courses.
Yeah.
And then, making sure that we could vote on things and making sure we could discuss everything all the time. Those were some of the things each person came out with that would make them want to stay in the company that was paying them organization that was paying us $0. And that's why we've stuck around still doing this as well, because we're not exactly getting anything out of it. In fact, we're losing a lot of time, but we feel like we're getting
I'd like to put it forward to you that you're actually getting more than is apparent at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You're gaining a whole bunch of experience in what it is to do something that really means something to you.
Yeah.
And how to do that in a way that actually resonates and causes a ripple effect. There was a way to do this that could have been a complete failure and nobody would have paid attention and everyone just would have thought another pack of arseholes that aren't going to actually make anything of this. But the way that you approached it gave people confidence that you're actually going to do something with this. That's the difference. And that's nothing to sneeze at or cough at. It's
Kidding. I was thinking about doing a fake sneeze or a fake cough.
Nice.
I did neither.
But this is having people get on board with a movement. Look, the whole industry is struggling with how do we get the end user or the coffee drinker, how do we bring them on board to the movement of supporting the coffee farmer?
Yeah.
It's so difficult. It's so very, very difficult to make happen. You've done it in a way where people believe that you can actually execute. Like a lot of people can relate to a bunch of movements, but do they believe that the person who's creating the movement can execute?
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, no. People believe you.
Yeah. I mean, we are working really hard to make it, to execute change. So I'm glad. That makes me happy because, I sleep like 3 to 5 hours a day now because I'm just typing away and working really hard. So that's really reassuring. And we don't hear affirmations a lot from anyone around us because we're just like constantly.
You're all in it.
With each other and we're all just like working really hard and we're like, we need to do all this work. So it's nice to hear someone say like, yo, you're doing a great job.
You are doing a great job. And I would like to introduce you to a new word. You are now entrepreneurs.
What we always wanted.
You know what's funny? Well, I guess this is kind of off topic. I was in a pyramid scheme for a year and they were like,
gosh.
Sure.
Wow. Was it like an MLM?
Yeah, definitely. 100% MLM. Yeah. If you're going to join a pyramid scheme, join like the MLMs. Those are good.
Yeah, you at least end up with a whole bunch of product that you can't afford to pay back.
Oh yeah, it's fine.
Go Herbalife.
Herbalife is so good.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah,
sue me. I don't give a fuck. Go for it. Yeah. So what you're doing, have you heard the term socialpreneur?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
So social media influencer?
No, it's a social movement.
Oh,
so like a social justice movement. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're doing. and you're doing it with I hate to keep using this word, I'm sorry, but you're doing it with a bunch of integrity. Look at you two. You're like, woo! Oh shit.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Something that you have mentioned a couple of times now is that, like, because Slate had such a great name, that kept you going. You know, that's what takes people there.
Yeah.
I fell into that same trap really early on in my career.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it is about these companies that we will happily dismiss the workplace culture?
Yeah.
Before you say anything, could you tell me, is that a stripper pole behind you?
Oh,
Yes.
100%. No.
Okay, great.
It's my lamp.
Oh, it's not a stripper pole.
I was going to demonstrate it in just a second.
And snap my lamp in half.
So it doesn't, you can't tell whether it's really close to you or whether it's really far back from you. For anyone who's just listening to this, behind Felix and Sam is a black pole, and it looks quite thin, but there's no depth of field so that you can't get any kind of context if it's close to them or farther away from them.
Fourth job.
Yes.
And so it could very well be a stripper pole because of the way that it's positioned in the frame. You can't see the top and you can't see the bottom. So it looks like a pole that's just going floor to ceiling. And who am I to fucking judge whether Felix has a stripper pole in his house or not?
I'm
But
down for it.
go for it.
Yeah. I think installing it is the biggest challenge. Yeah.
There are people that will do that for you. No problem.
I'm scared of it flying if I'm like swinging on it and the pole just like shooting across the room and me flying across the room.
No, dude, they have they screw that shit in so for safety reasons. You're fine. You can hang off that thing as much as you want.
Feel free.
I don't speak from experience.
No experience at all. We can tell.
I have friends who have stripper poles in their houses, and I always wonder, like, what do you tell people when they come over? And they're like, they have a go. I'm like, that's so awesome. That's brilliant.
It's so good.
So going back to the serious side of the conversation, what do you think it is about us as an industry that makes us drawn to working for knowing that we're going to get treated like shit?
I think in the moment, what I did was like, it's not going to be that bad. It'll be
Yeah,
fine.
I can identify with that.
Or you're like, I'll just push through for a little bit and then I'll quit and then I'll find something better. You know, I just need it on my resume because people.
Yeah.
Something Rachel is actually really passionate about businesses that they support. So this is kind of like tangenting, but like people will go to a business not knowing that like the business treats their employees like garbage, you know? And yeah, so I guess back to the question, I feel like also people feel this sense of like, maybe it'll be different for me. Like maybe it won't be that bad for me. Or like, maybe this person is exaggerating it. Like I can cope with this.
Right.
Yeah, and then it just takes time for like someone to get pummeled down by the industry.
When I joined, I saw how they pushed out the manager before me, and I was like, I will make it different. I can affect change. I have a different style of leadership. I think I can influence this company. And so it took me 2 years before I realized that wasn't happening. But yeah, I think we are, I mean, especially in the coffee industry, we are just a bunch of people who get really passionate about the craft and about the art. Yeah. And we're very passionate about what we can do. And so that's why we sort of go into these situations, because we think we can do something about it. Yeah. Well, that was me at least.
Yeah. I mean, I've met a bunch of people who work at other coffee shops and they're like, I'm going to change the cafe culture. Like, just watch. And I'm like, it's not like, I don't know, you can't change the cafe culture if they've been getting away with it for like 10 years and if there's not like a need for change, or like if there's not a visible need to like the owners for change. You know what I mean? Like I've heard of a lot of like owners who are like scared of us now because like we walked out, and I'm like, well, maybe you should treat your folks better and you wouldn't be scared, you know? Maybe you'd be proud to I don't know, own a business that treats your employees well.
Are you Are you guys worried about the fallout that will come from this with regards to your future employment?
No.
We went through that and we decided that assholes would not hire us because they'd be scared we'd do the same thing, and good people would absolutely hire us because they
That's fair.
weren't going to do it.
Yep.
So it was kind of a win-win for us.
Nice. It will be very interesting to see how future employers approach this situation with you guys. I can definitely see that this is a great way to make sure that assholes don't employ you.
Don't fuck with this.
Well, go ahead, Sam. No, please.
So we had a massive amount of people offering to hire us.
Yeah.
I'd say 20, maybe a lot of people
Yeah.
offered to hire us. And I did take some interviews with some companies that I actually have worked. I've worked for a lot of coffee companies in Seattle, like all of them.
Yeah, like name one. Sam's worked there.
And so some of the ones that had slightly less good, I had less good experiences at, which by the way, I always gave 2 weeks. I never have walked out and probably will never walk out again because that's not my style of being an employee. But I did go and take interviews with some of these cafes and then ask them, why would you hire a bunch of people who just walked out because of hostile working environments in a cafe like yours?
Yeah.
So it was actually a really interesting question to ask.
What were some of the answers?
Well, the one that I found a little sad was that this person had only been the general manager of this coffee company for 3 weeks and didn't know about the internal issues within the company yet.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'm really sorry that you're about
Shit.
although that person said that they thought they would be able to change the company culture.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that owner is a bit of a rat. So
Yeah. He's a lot.
I feel bad for that.
They're a lot.
That's such a Kiwi saying, such a rat.
I
Nobody says that here. It's really
didn't know
nice
what
to
that
hear.
meant, honestly. I was like, oh yeah, they're totally a rat.
Yeah, no, don't worry. We have our language. We know what that means.
totally fine.
Nobody else will know, but just
we too know. So what was the word that you used? A hostile working environment. That's the word that you used. So hostile is an intense word,
Yeah.
right? Define for me what that means.
Yeah, and actually we've had to do this so many times. We're almost numb to it. We did Google hostile work environment before we put it on our paper.
Mhm.
And we got recommended to use that terminology when we were having our first meetings by someone who was a school teacher and understands strikes and doing the vote of no confidence to get rid of. Anyway, she recommended that we use this because we had we checked all of the boxes for hostile work.
Okay.
Oh,
Now
nice.
you talk. I know.
I don't know what the checks are.
The checks. So
Which is what?
look, I'll pull
Okay.
it up.
Well, I feel like I can talk about personal experiences that I
Mhm.
define as hostile. It's like kind of at one of the locations I worked at, it's like I would come in and I would work with a certain individual and suddenly they're talking ill about like my coworkers or employees that I really, really like. And it's a lot of like, it was a lot of like, oh, I'm going to be this position now. And that's my dream. I want that position. And it's like, isn't there someone already in that position? And I feel like just like the whole like knocking people down and grabbing people's jobs is really hostile and really toxic and like definitely not okay. In my opinion, that's not how you cultivate like culture. That's how you like bring people down. And yeah, that's how you push people out, I guess.
And was that from co-workers or was that from leadership?
That was from leadership.
Okay.
I just want to say that every barista at Slate, maybe one ever, are amazing. Somehow, unfortunate management and unfortunate ownership have managed to hire lower priority staff that are amazing people.
Yeah.
I've met the most amazing people. So any of our issues are all coming from upper management.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's never like
Even the
coworkers.
middle management, like all of the store managers, are
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It was great.
So yeah.
I appreciate you clarifying that that distinction, because it sounds like if we summarize a little bit of what the situation is, that the situation at Slate has allegedly been always shit.
Yeah, always pretty crappy.
Right. And it went next level about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
When there was new leadership inserted into kind of upper management. We're not talking about the owners, we're talking about the leadership just below the owners. Is that correct?
So the original Slate was originally set up by Chelsea Walker Watson, and she was sort of the person in the middle who would protect all of the employees before I came in. She left the company right when I came in, and that's all I can speak to as the experience after that.
I guess, sorry.
So,
I should clarify that.
She has a lot of people who really respect. I never worked for her, but a lot of people really respected her when they worked with her. So she was sort of the person who stood in the middle. So even though there were always issues with the other owners, there was always that buffer for them. When she left, that's when that buffer left. And
so Chelsea was not one of the owners. She was just someone who was brought in to help set it up.
No, she was an owner. She's part of the family, but she left the company right before I came in. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So is it correct to say that shit went next level about 6 months ago when new leadership came in and they injected a hostile steroid, I guess?
It became very like toxic masculinity kind of like work environment. Like there's a lot of like toxic like masculinity going on.
How do you define toxic masculinity? I want to try and stay away from ambiguous terms. So let's define what you mean by that.
So what I mean is I feel like there's a certain like society like pushes men to be a certain way, and a lot of those coping mechanisms aren't healthy. So like not processing emotions is not healthy in my opinion. I guess we can stay away from like toxic masculinity, but
let's talk about it. I want to unpack it.
All of upper management were men, and they treated any femmes or any women like not well at all. From my experience, they did.
You're about to teach me something, Felix. Thank you.
Yeah. Like
what's the term femme mean?
Femmes mean like people who present like feminine, I guess, but you don't necessarily have to be like a woman or a man. You can be whoever you want, and you present like a little bit more feminine. That's why I say femmes, because like
what's the opposite of that?
Mask, like masculine. Yeah.
I'm learning.
You're doing great. Yeah. Experience all these individuals who worked in upper management like treated like femmes and women like not well at all, and that is not a healthy environment to be in. Because
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's not healthy to be in that environment. When you say that they didn't treat femmes and women in a healthy way, because this is important. This really goes to the heart of toxic cultures. This goes to the heart of where people feel unsafe and people don't feel heard. So I know, and I know this may be uncomfortable to talk about, but we're unpacking, right? That's why we wanted to have this conversation. And so help me understand what you mean by it was toxic for people who were femmes and women.
So you know how you're a person of color, right? When you go into a room and
apparently.
You're like
I'm still confused by all the terms of. I know I am. I'm born as I'm born in Australia, but I'm Arab. So apparently, although like the sun needs sunglasses if I wear shorts, I'm as fucking white as it comes. I remember the first time somebody said to me, "So what color are you?" I'm like, "What kind of a question is that?"
What kind of a question is that? I agree. So example, when we at one point at Slate they wanted to implement like waffles into the menu, and so we had a scheduled staff waffle training, And when you walk into the room and you're like, wow, I feel like I don't belong and I don't know why, that's like a red flag. So it's like when you walk into a room and there's like only white people there. And you're like, so where's the other people of color? Like, where are my folks? Like Slate didn't represent a lot of diversity.
In management. In baristas, Slate hired
a lot of people of color and a lot of queer people. But then slowly they were hiring more and more men, in my opinion. So I went to this waffle training, and literally there were maybe 2 or 3 people of color in a group of like 9 to 10 folks. And I was the only like femme. Like everyone else was like a man or like a straight white man. And it just feels so suffocating to be in an environment like that. Like that, I feel like that experience represents like what Slate or the kind of culture Slate wanted to cultivate.
And it's a very difficult, this has been the most difficult part about explaining why we walked out, is that it's very hard to come up with concrete examples of what made the environment so intolerable. We talked a lot about ownership, because ownership were the only people who were blatantly, like we had blatant text examples and speech examples. So much of how we were treated by the upper management was
kind of subtle.
It's sort of subtle.
Well, for you, like, it was not subtle
so
at
much,
all. But
more about how things were said rather than quotable. This was bad.
Like they were us like derogatory names, like sorry, like some like the owners would, but not us, but people. But yeah, it was like a lot of like collective experiences that made us feel unsafe and not appreciated. So yeah, I felt like a huge lack of representation at Slate, because I was like, probably like all the queer people of color or any person of color or queer person like quit and left because we just couldn't handle it. It's hard to be in a space like that where you feel suffocated and like not represented at all, not seen.
So this is presenting a really interesting situation, I think, our generation right now, like our whole industry is facing for the first time. It's not new to have happened, but it's the first time for us to be questioning it as intensely as we are questioning it, right? So me as a person of color, as we call it now, I can identify with some of what you're saying, because I remember the feeling of going and working with, I guess, we don't use the word white people in Australia. We say Aussies. And everyone else, so it's Aussies and wogs. Okay, so the wogs, I'm sorry?
Sam gets it. No? Yeah? Okay, maybe not.
So a wog is someone who's like an ethnic person.
Yeah.
So here they call, like an Italian person would be considered a white person because they're from Europe and the European settlers are the white people, right? But no, in Australia, someone who's Italian is considered a wog, and you're only really a white person or an Aussie, as we call them, if you are like English, like your heritage is English, right? So that's how it was separated out. So
I guess the reason why I say the term, or why I say white people, it's because they have so much, like they benefit from so much privilege, especially in America, like so much privilege.
I definitely hear you on that side of things, and I'm not in any way saying like it's a contentious issue. I definitely agree with you there. I'm trying to empathize with that feeling of yours, and so what I'm saying is, like, I would go into situations. I guess the simplest way to put this is that I was surprised how scared I was of Aussies.
No. I feel
no, really. Like I grew up. Australia's a very racist country, right? And so I worked in the coffee industry in London as well. And so I felt very intimidated having grown up in Australia and being through the corporate kind of gauntlet in Australia, being around Aussies or white people really intimidated me, really intimidated me.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I felt quite intimidated in the coffee industry being around a lot of white people or Aussies.
Yeah.
But I never saw that as their problem, which is really interesting. Like, and I think that there's a shift in cultures, or a shift in, I don't know what the right term is, maybe perspective in the way that we're looking at it now. But I always thought that that was my shit to deal with.
Yeah, a lot of people who identify as a minority, so like if you're queer, person of color, whatever, feel that. Like, for example, if I'm scared of using a restroom, that's my fault, and I have to bring it up because I'm the minority that feels uncomfortable. Whereas it's like, you know, it's a common like thing that we all like talk about and try to handle. And now I think you're right, there is a shift in like asking people to be a little bit more intentional and like think about like not force people who are scared and feel traumatized to like bring up their trauma to ask for change. You know what I mean? Like,
I am absolutely hearing what you're saying. And I guess I feel like these things are changing quicker than culture is able to keep up with.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In that, like, this shift is going on, and the cultural change that needs to embed itself in the way we treat each other and we bring ourselves into as normal behavior, it's not catching up in any way, shape, or form as quickly as it needs to. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Yes, and so I had never. I mean, I am I feel like a brown person because a lot of my family is Polynesian, but I don't necessarily get treated like a person of color. So that's not any kind of discrimination I have experienced. But I do also work in the music industry, and when I'll go into a jam session, I'll play, and then where I watch all of the males who are playing. When someone comes to meet them, they'll say, "Hey, we should jam together," or "We should play together." When they come up to me, they say, "Hey, we should go out for a drink." That always happens. And so sexism is something I've become very familiar with, having moved in the music circles. So I'm very familiar with it now. That said, I think it is now the opportunity of every able person who has the emotional capacity or the financial capacity to speak up. We may not necessarily have the experience of people who are being discriminated against, but we have the opportunity to speak up and use our platform as people who are not discriminated against to be able to speak for the people who are not being listened to.
I really like that, the way that you put that. And I guess taking the other side of things, because I'm with you, I'm definitely a massive advocate for speaking for people who can't speak for themselves simply because they don't know the words. You know, it's sometimes so traumatic to defend yourself, to speak up for yourself because of previous traumas, because of feeling intimidated, because of not knowing the consequences that come from that. So I really love the way that you guys are putting that. What I would like us to talk about is the other side of that, is being on the receiving end of that kind of, for lack of a better term, confrontation, because it is a confrontation. And I think it's always healthy to see how your words can be received so that we can potentially formulate them better. You know what I'm saying? So when Felix, you're saying that you're in a room getting waffle training, that just sounds so strange.
Yeah.
Only because I never grew up with waffles. I mean, Sam, you can relate to the fact that, Like peanut butter and toast was a thing, but waffles
I
wasn't.
do eat waffles now, but
Yeah, but we didn't.
Snickers growing up, which is just fried dough and a bunch of oil. Ooh, so good.
That sounds so much better than waffles.
The dream.
But so, it's being in a room where you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
How did you approach what you're describing to be toxic masculinity? How did you approach that situation? Were you able to, or did you have to have an ally speak up for you?
Yeah, I couldn't handle it. I had to leave. Yeah.
The room?
Yeah, I had to leave the whole thing. Yeah, it was too much. We started doing this thing where people were like cutting vegetables and doing things in front of like everyone, and I was like, I can't handle this pressure. Like I gotta go. So,
and were you able to articulate that? Was the option given to you to not have to be front and center like that?
No, it was really, I mean, I feel like the intention wasn't to be like to do that, but that's just what happened, and everyone was just like standing there with their arms crossed and watching, and I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, this is weird. Yeah, instead of like, like all of us doing a task at the same time. And then, yeah.
And I do want to say, in the interest of presenting all sides of everything, when we feel self-conscious about something, it can often be that nobody else in the room, and I'm guilty of this, I feel super self-conscious of something and then realize that nobody else in the room is in any way
like judging,
on the same page as me. Like, I will often think like, everybody's watching me fuck up right now.
Yeah.
And then when I'll ask someone later, they're like, dude, you fucking nailed it. No one was thinking that you were fucking up at all. And I'm like, okay, this is a really good lesson for me yet again, to stop being so focused on me. But that doesn't diminish the fact that you felt that you were being, you should at least be given the opportunity to not have to be in the spotlight if you don't want to be in the spotlight. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it was more so like coming into a situation, being really, really anxious in that situation already, and then feeling like, well, I personally felt this. I don't know if people would feel the same in my situation, but feeling like I can't back out. Like, I got to do it. I got to do it well. And like, also it has to tie into it ties into my own like mental illness and my own like anxiety, but like feeling that pressure and putting it on myself is also something that's like very intense and triggering too in that situation. So like, I'm not saying it's all of them, but I'm also saying that like I feel like that wasn't a great place full of representation and safe and a safe space.
And so your opportunity at that in experiencing that was to call the one person that could represent you, which would be me, direct manager, and then me to call it the person who was managing that store. Of course, I have no representation at that point. So even though I was like, hey, this is happening, is there something you can do about it? That manager had no concept of the issues Felix was facing.
Yeah.
So there was no way to adjust that situation either. So you didn't really have representation because I was a female and was not able to communicate the position a femme presenting person might be in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Right. And this is where I do have some good news for everybody who's listening to this, because I know that there's going to be a lot of people listening to this episode who can really identify with a lot of what you guys have been experiencing. And I've experienced a lot of what you're talking about in the past. And look, when I came up through, there was so fewer women than there are now. And so it was very much, you're in there for yourself and sink or swim. Right. And look, it was character building and traumatic as well. But I don't consider myself, I consider myself very fortunate because it's empowered me for this journey that is Map It Forward. It's really given me a lot in being able to empathize with what you're going through and experiencing. And so I do have some good news. a lot of we're going to see, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot more of this presenting, particularly in the millennial and the Gen Z generations. And I say this not from an opinion perspective. I say this from a lot of the research that I've read, particularly coming from people like Angela Lee Duckworth and Jonathan Haidt. If you haven't read The Coddling of the American Mind, please go read it. A lot of this is about the idea that the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation were raised in a different way than the generations that came before them. Right? And that's neither a good nor a bad thing. It's just the way it's happened. Mm-hmm. And so a consequence of that is that you have a generation of leadership and management that talks a completely different language to the generation of their employees without any kind of understanding of the cohesion that needs to happen there. Or an appreciation for that difference. What you've got is one generation, which is Gen X, who believes in, and I'm a Gen Xer, right? I'm in my 40s, and I was raised to believe that hard work and, go, and that's how you should get praised, and you'll get there and just work your ass off. Mm-hmm. Whereas Gen Y or millennials and Gen Z are all about working smarter, working with more intention, working with more appreciation for each other. Does all of that sound familiar?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel like working with intention would be great.
Right. But can you see how when you've got one generation that's all about working hard and another generation that's all about working with intention, they're both talking different languages. They're not on the same page with what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And because of that, what you end up is with two different communication styles. And neither of them, one of them is being super passive aggressive, and the other one's being super aggressive. Mm-hmm. And what you end up with is no one hearing anybody else or understanding anybody else or on the same page as anyone else. And everyone fucking hates everything that they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy. And so here's where the good news comes in. Jamie Berry is a psychologist who's been on this podcast. What?
Oh, you just cut out and we're like, we can't hear a thing. We're just going to keep going with it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine. It was
Okay. So Jamie Berry is a psychologist that's been on this podcast, and he gave a talk at our 3-day conference that we did in Sydney last year for Map It Forward. And he gave a 2-hour talk on assertiveness. Mm-hmm. And so assertiveness, if we were to draw a seesaw, an assertiveness seesaw, and you have aggression on one end of the seesaw, and you have passive behavior on the other end of the seesaw, you have assertiveness in the center. And so the idea behind assertiveness is that you say what you mean and you mean what you say. And if you're able to communicate what you need to communicate, the moment someone starts to step all over you and your intentions, you're able to communicate how you're feeling in a way that helps someone know you need to back the fuck off right now without it being aggressive.
Yeah.
But in order for that to work, you need to be in an environment where assertive communication, not passive aggressive communication or passive communication or aggressive communication, is the accepted culture. An assertive culture is what needs to be accepted. And that's, I think, the goal that we all need to be striving for. An environment where people can be free to communicate in a way that is grown up and mature and intentional, right? Does that sound reasonable?
Absolutely. And for me, I think that's, so I think I'm a millennial. Actually, I don't know what part of generation.
How old are you?
I'm 29.
You are just on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z.
So I I have a lot of friends who are millennial, or I have a lot of friends who are
older than you.
We're all young, and but I grew up as a New Zealander, and of course, the way we grew up was we don't care what's fair. If you can work the system, that's what we respect. So you're
Okay.
but then I've also spent a lot of time, reading and listening to podcasts. It's like my favorite thing ever. And I live in a house where we have a baby, and the way we're raising the baby is to say you can do anything that you put your mind to, as long as you work your little ass off. You can't do anything. You have to work for it as well. So I sort of hold both of those things. You can do anything you please, but you have to work really hard to do it. So I've also sort of come to, I've lost my train of thought, but I agree. As long as you're talking about it, as long as you have very direct lines of communication and everyone can express exactly what they're feeling, you can get anything done. Like myself and Felix couldn't be more opposite, but we're able to work in this organization together because I'm very direct and will absolutely make him say what he needs to say.
What do you mean by you're opposite? I don't think you guys are. How are you opposite?
Well, like I am naturally really passive aggressive. Sam's not passive aggressive at all. She's like direct. Let's squash this beef. But I'll be like passive aggressive, and then I'll like hold on to it, and then I'll like I'll approach it and I'll talk about it, and then I'll let it go. And it takes like a long time, and it takes a lot of energy to step away from being passive aggressive and being direct, and being like direct with how I feel and what I think.
And I'm always very excited to be wrong. If someone can present another opportunity for me to learn something, I'm completely happy to move over to that area. I don't hold anything too tightly. If you present something that's a better thing than what I'm thinking, I'm completely happy to move over to your area. But you have to be able to present it. And that's not one of Felix's favorite things to do.
I'm just
right. Right. And that's what assertive communication is, right? Like learning how to be assertive with yourself is all about boundaries. And so understanding where the boundaries are, and not letting people step over your boundaries, and learning how to communicate what your boundaries are going to help you in creating a comfort zone that allows you to show up for yourself and for your employer in a way that doesn't compromise anyone's values or their intentions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think particularly for folks like you, Felix, who could really benefit from learning how to establish those boundaries and communicate those boundaries, this assertiveness training that we're going to put on for the industry is going to be really, really valuable. And empowering, because I think it's the silver bullet to a lot of the future conflicts that are going to present themselves in workplaces. Because what we have here is we have employees who are saying, I feel really intimidated in these situations. And I don't know why you don't know that I'm intimidated in this situation, even though I haven't communicated it to you. And then you have employers saying, I don't understand why this person is not speaking up when I need them to speak up, not realizing that you're feeling intimidated in this situation. And I think that if we can help those kinds of employers learn how to have more empathy. And we can empower people to learn how to use or have a voice and use a voice. All of the sudden, what we've done is we've just added oil to the machine. And so it starts to flow. There's that life currency again. It starts to flow in a way that encourages people to want to be a part of it rather than sabotage it.
And I think that's where we see ourselves as an organization.
Absolutely.
Because right now, employers don't need to have that communication style. What they have is working. So we're going to have two arms. We want to educate employers, but we know that they're not going to need or think they need our education until we worked from the bottom and started empowering their employees and started creating an issue for them to then need to educate themselves on as well. that's where we feel like we're going to come in.
I mean, yeah, I've just worked with so many people and different people in positions of leadership and power where they're like, my leadership style is completely fine, but it's like very intimidating. And I feel like a lot of like baristas are very intimidated because like one, they don't want to lose their job. They're always, a lot of people are so afraid of getting fired. And two, it's just like, I've approached a lot of people who are like my way or highway. So it's kind of like, okay, I like worked up all this courage to be direct and to assert something, yet I'm like shut down. And I feel like after being shut down so many times, it's like I can see that as a pattern of being like, maybe I just shouldn't, because it's
Right.
yeah. So it's just like teaching, you're right, like we should teach owners how to be more empathetic and like really understand like you are in a position of leadership and there is a dynamic there and you can't pretend that dynamic doesn't exist. You know, yeah,
For sure. And I'm going to do a sweeping generalization here. So there's some science that supports this. There's some science that says it's not true. Like there's a debate going on about it. But the reason the debate's going on about it is because of the underlying idea of, is gender real or isn't gender real? Right. So what I'm about to say. So there's science that says that the way that women and men evolved is that women, people who were born biologically as women, their brain formulates in a way that encourage, and social reinforcement through the generations reinforces women to naturally be more empathetic. And there are hormones that are released in our body that, we have higher estrogen levels and higher progesterone levels than men, and lower testosterone levels that encourage us to feel different ways during our cycles and whatnot. And empathy is something that women gravitate towards more in general. That's not all women. It's not a 100% science. And then on the other side of things, there is, the same studies have shown that men elicit the converse kinds of behavioral traits, which are competition, aggression, and assertiveness.
yeah,
Right. And so the science that that disputes those facts is not necessarily disputing those facts. What it's talking about is, well, are gender roles real? Is gender real? So it's not really talking about the results of that study. It's trying to break down the idea of gender norms. But in general, what we're finding in society is that when you do you say like a binary kind of approach to things? Is that the right terminology?
yeah. Binary means like man and woman.
Yeah. So when you're taking a binary approach to these kinds of things, that's what the studies have shown. And so what we're entering is a gray area where we need to be more observant of what the gray is.
Yeah.
And we need to be more observant in a way where it's not just like but I don't understand. Hey, listen, I don't understand either. But that's not an excuse. If I choose to be an employer or I choose to be a part of an industry, it's my job to show up respectfully for my colleagues. So it doesn't mean that I can't fuck up. It doesn't mean that I have to pander to anyone's agenda, and I won't. Like, fuck, you could know me for 5 minutes and know that I'm not going to pander to anyone's agenda.
Yeah.
But I absolutely want to be respectful of people's needs.
Yeah.
I want to be supportive in any way that I can, particularly for things that make other folks feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
She's gone to pee.
Yeah.
Right. She warned ahead of time and said, I may need to have to go and pee. But my point is that we're in a time where we're all going to need to do some work. So for those of us who feel intimidated, as you're saying, Felix, you feel really intimidated in these kinds of situations. It would be one thing to turn around and say, well, it's everybody else's problem in the room to make me feel more comfortable. right? And that's absolutely one approach that we could all take. What my concern is that there are a lot of people in the industry that are taking that approach and saying, well, everybody else needs to make me feel more comfortable. And I think that that's a very unilateral kind of, like, it's a one-sided way of approaching that.
Entitlement. Yeah. Like,
Sorry, say that again?
That sounds like entitlement.
Exactly.
Well, like, there are people who are, like, very entitled from the people that I've met, and I don't know very many people, I guess, just like in the general Seattle area. Most people who are really like upset and angry are angry because they don't feel like seen and heard, which sucks a lot. But it's also true, like, some people are really entitled, and yeah, I think they're just like, I think that entitlement comes from like a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and that's how that's translating.
Right. And on that, which is a really great point, but as an employer, your trauma isn't my responsibility. Creating a safe space for you is my responsibility.
That's also true. Yeah.
Right. So I guess what I would, and this is why I think the assertiveness training is a silver bullet for everybody. Like, if we can teach employees and employers the idea of assertiveness, because empathy is a part of assertiveness, boundaries is a part of assertiveness. You know, if we can arm the industry with learning to say what the fuck they mean and mean what the fuck they say, all of a sudden we have people communicating and taking ownership of their own feelings, right? And that's something that I definitely do want to see. I want people to, because I'm really concerned about this idea that Jonathan Haidt is presenting about the, you know, the coddling of the American mind. I am legitimately concerned for millennials and for Gen Zs in the sense, and in an absolutely non-derogatory or condescending kind of way, because I think that there's so much that millennials and Gen Zs bring to the table that excite the fuck out of me. They really do. But this is one of those things that I think could come to hurt those generations, because if you haven't been prepared for doing the hard shit, and if you are debilitated by anxiety, and I'm someone who's lived with debilitating anxiety my whole life, and have just learnt coping mechanisms, and assertiveness has been the absolute silver bullet for me. And that's only been the last couple of years. And I've experienced depression and suicidal tendencies and thoughts and all of that. So I absolutely get that. But if we don't empower people who feel anxiety in situations that don't have to be as anxiety laden as they are, I think we're going to run into a lot of trouble as an industry with retaining staff. But what's worse is I feel that we'd be doing a disservice to people who we should be coaching to move beyond their anxiety, not by demeaning them, not by making people feel uncomfortable, but by reassuring people and helping them understand that, hey, you got this. I know that it's a little bit more difficult for you than it may have been for somebody else, but fuck that someone else.
Yeah.
I'm going to support you through this.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Like, I think you're illustrating a culture where people are being supportive and being, like, very intentional. And, like, I think we've been talking about that for however long, like, having a very intentional and, like, supportive place to grow personally and professionally, whatever that may be. Like, let's say that, well, I do have, like, really bad anxiety, and Sam created a space where I could be anxious, but also, like, find ways to cope and grow and, like, deal with these situations while being anxious. Yeah.
I like the idea that it's a middle ground of the seesaw too that you were talking about.
Yeah.
That we who are emotional communicators don't need to just wait till our employers move all the way down to us, but that we can move up and be direct, and then they can meet us in the middle as well. Yeah. I think that's really important to note. Yeah. Everyone can adjust to something.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing, the really important part of that is understanding, I think, that these are learnt skills.
Yeah.
You know, it's it's going to require practice and patience from everyone. Like, expecting somebody who experiences anxiety to just know how the fuck to be assertive is just unreasonable.
Yeah.
People don't become anxious purely for no reason. They become anxious and experience anxiety for a ton of reasons. It's previous traumas is one reason. An imbalance in your gut microbiome is also clearly linked to high anxiety for some people because of it elevated different hormone levels. You know, like, there's so many reasons people feel anxiety, and for us to be disrespectful of what those reasons are is, first of all, just not cool.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's just shit. But going to the core of what this discussion is about, it makes the culture of the work environment sticky.
Yeah.
It makes it something that you don't want to be a part of, and it cultivates more anxiety, right? Which is what you guys experienced, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Kind of. I'm kind of unclear as to like what you mean by making culture sticky. Like,
so it makes it. It's probably another Australianism. I drop them every now and then. I'm like, fuck, I've said a word nobody understands except the Aussies in the room.
Rats. I've said a word nobody.
Rats.
Rats.
Rats would have been something that my grandfather would have said in Australia. You go, girl. So sticky means something that isn't, I guess the word in America would be slippery.
yeah, like,
You know, it creates a slippery situation whereby it could go one way or the other, and you get what I mean? Like, so if you have a situation that's filled with anxiety, and you're not treating people the right way, if that person loses their shit because you've got them to a point where they're just going to erupt.
Yeah.
Fuck all the consequences.
Yeah. I think giving.
Or, sorry, I just want to finish that thought.
Go for it. Go.
Or everyone gets so pissed off that they walk out of the work environment.
Yeah. Oh, now I understand.
Yeah. Right? So if you push people too far and you've left them with no room to be able to work with you anymore. And that's absolutely what it sounds like it happened with Slate. That it built and it built and it built and it built to the point where there was no leverage anymore for you guys to want to work with leadership to grow the situation, to fix the situation, to heal the situation. And that's at the point of no return.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Now, Sam, you were going to tell us what you meant by the definition of a hostile work environment.
Oh, but I gave that up so long ago. There are like a whole bunch of. I was looking through emails to try and find the one that was so long ago. It's been like weeks since we started this.
So long ago.
And it must feel like a year, though.
Sorry?
It does.
It feels like a long time. I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. I think I've aged 10 years. But there are like, you have to have certain things that define if it's that say if it is a hostile work environment or not. And we had checked all of those boxes.
Okay. Are you guys still in conversation with Slate?
We are still speaking to Slate.
The owners?
Well, we are still speaking. We have heard about as much from them as we heard from them while we were working with them. So that's nothing. Slate posted a response on Instagram to our personal unhappiness, and that is the amount we heard from Slate. They talked to the Seattle Times, but that's the only news source they spoke with. And then they recently started posting again on their Instagram, things about them, but they still have comments limited. And the reason that took a while is because they also lost their social media manager in the walkout, or a little bit after the walkout.
Yeah.
So I understand that you four weren't the only ones that walked out as a consequence. There was a fallout that came after this. Yeah. Is that right?
2 people had quit in the 2 weeks coming up to us walking out, One other person had been fired, and I got fired, and then the 6 people who did the walkout on that day, and then after that, by the end, I think the numbers are at like 13 people total.
Yeah,
have
that sounds
walked
about
out from that, including a lot of the roastery team,
Yeah.
and then for a while there. I mean, in Seattle, it's easy to hire baristas. There are a lot of baristas, and so they've very likely been able to restaff somewhat now. But for a while though, they had 3 or 4 baristas for the 5 cafes.
Yeah.
Shit.
Good
That's not a good way to run a business.
Yeah, one day, one location was being run by the green bean buyer. One was being run by the assistant director,
manager of
director.
operations.
I can't remember what
Manager
their
of
name
operations.
is.
Yeah,
There we go. And then one was being run by the manager of operations.
Yeah.
And then one was being run by the store. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah.
It was
like
hilarious.
all people in upper management were running the stores.
Which was good because I didn't know some of them knew how to run a bar. So that was fun to find out, I think.
Wow.
And the Ballard location is still closed because they haven't been able to staff that.
Yeah.
So this is clearly costing them money. Like this situation has cost them revenue.
I think everything they've done since I've worked with them has costed them money. I don't know. The Seattle Times article came out and said that they're $40,000 behind on their taxes. So I think money has not been I don't know. It feels like money hasn't been something they've been considering for a long time. I'm not sure exactly what's up with that. But not a lot of the financial decisions that have been made have been great decisions. Like opening up a store a mile away from the other Pioneer location, which isn't a moneymaker. Opening up the Facebook location. I worked that location and I had 3 customers my entire shift. So I don't know. There's a lot. But maybe Facebook.
And who knows? Like there's a whole bunch of reasons that business owners do things. Some of them are for reasons that don't make sense to everybody else, but do financially make sense to. You don't know what deals have been done. They may not be paying any rent or any wages or anything like that. They may be subsidized by Facebook and things like that. Those kinds of deals get done all the time because places just want a cafe to come in and they'll pay for everything. As long as you're here, that's all we care about. So those kinds of things get done. I got to ask, why a walkout? I guess we've answered that though. It seems like you guys had already been pushed to the brink, and that's why this was the only way to make the point that needed to be made. Is that correct? Do you think that that's fair?
We considered a union, but none of us wanted to work for them anymore.
For me personally, it was because like now I know what a union was or is, but before I was like, I don't know what a union is.
Oh.
Yeah, but if I knew back then, I would have pushed for making a union. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but
well,
I don't
the other
regret
people
my
who had the conversation. So I didn't know that you didn't know what a union was, but when I had realized I was going to be leaving, I had said, "Hey, do you still want to do? Do you want to?" We had talked about what the possible things were, and if people wanted to continue working for Slate if I wasn't there, or not, and it was a general consensus that it wouldn't, even if there was an HR person hired, and even if there were better pay or supposedly better working conditions, we'd still have to work under those very unpleasant people in leadership because they weren't necessarily going to be pushed out.
Yeah. But also when I wanted to do the union, it was the thought of like Sam still working at the company. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't want to start, or when you left, it was like, I wouldn't want to work there anymore. So
our co-workers are very important to us.
Yeah, that's true.
The people you work with every day are just it's a life currency. It's, connectedness and all of that is a really, really important part of why we do, or why we choose to stay. Like if you're working with shitty people, you don't want to be there.
That's true.
Unless you're getting paid. And that's the thing that I speak to whenever I have my consulting clients. Like, listen, if you want the best and you don't care if they get on, you'll have to pay them lots of money. You'll have to incentivize people to be there for reasons other than feeling warm and fuzzy, because that's a part of their pay. People want to feel good when they come to work. And if they're not going to feel good when they come to work, the only thing that keeps them there is hey, I'm taking home the dollars.
Yeah. I've actually multiple cafe jobs where I've been there for like, where I was there for like 3 to like 6 months because the pay was good, and I'm like, this is fine. I'll just sacrifice for the money. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, people do it for different reasons. Like some people are parents, and they don't have the luxury of giving a shit how they feel at work. Like they've got to put food on the table. And other people, you know, they need to feel good when they go to work. I wish everybody would need to feel good when they go to work.
Yeah.
It's important, and I wish that employers would need their people to feel good when they come to work. That should be an incentive to have happy employees.
Yeah.
So let's talk a minute as we get close to wrapping up. What's the response been like from the world of coffee? I imagine it's been an onslaught and a half.
Yeah. So I've been dealing with a lot of the responses on social media. You've been dealing with a lot of like news and like emails. I've been getting a lot of people who feel empowered and feel very like heard and seen, which is really great. A lot of people relate to us, and it's generally a really positive response, which has been like really
It's awesome.
A-okay with me.
For me, it's been a little scarier because I felt like we didn't have all of our ducks in a row before. We didn't really have a choice. We didn't know we were going to have this platform, but we've had several people email and be like, you inspired us to want to talk to our management. And what those people haven't known is that there's no protection for, there's the laws about unionizing, but there's no real protection. We went to DSA meetings to talk about unionizing, and there's nothing that's going to stop your boss from firing you if you look like you're about to stand up against them. So people email in and be like, hey, we set up a meeting to try and talk to the boss about changing things, and we just got fired. And for me, it's a little scary that people are being inspired by us when we haven't yet been able to say, hey, you need to do all of these things first before you talk to the people who are making your lives miserable. So that's been a little bit rough.
Because we're like working as hard and as fast as we can. Like this platform grew in like, it's been
5 seconds.
It's been like 2 weeks, you know? And so like we within the month, like we were supposed to walk out like July 20th, 22nd, I don't remember the date, but we were supposed to like build systems in place for people so that they can figure out what like they want to do. But now we're building it right now in the midst of it. Like these were systems we wanted to have in place.
And trying to support us, like trying to find jobs as well.
My God.
It's been really fun.
It's been rough.
Yeah, wow. Are you both still looking for work?
No, I have a job.
And I'm moving, so it's a bit of a struggle for me to find a job. So we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we do wrap up, what are some of the things that you want people to know that we haven't talked about?
Know that regardless of how, I guess I'm talking to like the social media platforms, no matter like, because I'm some of the, like, I guess like 70% of the time I'm the one responding. If you don't feel seen and heard, it's not because like you're not important. It's because like there's just a lot on our plate, and we do care about you, but we just are trying to build like systems so that you can support yourself and you can empower yourself. Like everything that you feel is valid, even though whether or not I validate it or whether or not someone else validates it, like just know that, you know. I just want
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we're taking steps to learn. We're learning as quickly as we can what can be done in any kind of situation.
Yeah.
Not everyone is going to be able to do a walkout. Not everyone's going to be able to unionize. Baristas are very airy-fairy. We all move between jobs depending on what we can do. So there's always something that can be done about everything, even if it's just posting on Glassdoor about your experience so that you can warn the next person coming after you. I really do want to elevate the industry to be able to use that platform. Because very few people use it in coffee, and most other industries or more elevated industries use that so that other people can know what they're coming for afterwards. So I think if we all started using that would be amazing. I think Slate had 1 4-star review on Glassdoor, and since then we've been able to post and bring it down to at least a 2 and hopefully down to a 1 at some point.
So what is Glassdoor?
Glassdoor is where people review their companies.
Yeah, it's great.
It's fantastic.
My therapist told me about it.
Yeah, the coffee community doesn't use it, and they should, because most people get jobs all the time in the coffee community. There's a lot of transfer. So
Yeah.
that's
I think
what
it
I
would be really
encourage.
helpful
Yeah.
because we are sharing stories. But what if people shared stories about their experiences on Glassdoor? And
Not
then-
everyone is following Coffee at Large.
Yeah.
So if they wanted to just be normal people and look, we're normal. It's like when you go to college, you look at ratemyprofessor.com. That's my favorite site when I was taking classes. It's like college.
Yeah.
For,
It's like kind of like that.
it's for anyone.
Is it like Yelp?
Yeah, it's
like
like
that's a more
Yelp for getting
millennial
jobs.
term. Yelp.
Sure.
We all know what Yelp is, right?
Right.
Getting employment.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess the alternative to that would be making sure that together with all of that, we try and shift workplaces so that people are working in happy places so that nobody needs to walk out or stage a protest or anything like that.
That's the end goal for sure.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we don't want a workforce where baristas are walking out because, look, my biggest fear is that if this happens more and more and more, what's going to happen is there's going to be, rather than cohesiveness, what we're going to end up with is people accelerating the automation era, and people saying, well, fuck these baristas, we're just going to get machines in to make everything, and we only need 1 or 2 people on staff to just be good at talking to people. They don't need to have any skills at making coffee. And that's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
Right? And we want to try and avoid that if possible, because bless you, because what that ends up doing is it puts a bunch of people out of work really quickly.
Yeah.
And so what we want to teach everybody how to communicate and encourage everyone to listen to each other and show more empathy and compassion and listen to each other, and have people who look different to you working for you. Have people who think different to you but in alignment with your values. Diversity is a really fucking great, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And having that there enriches your workplace. But I guess the key thing to remember is being in business is really fucking hard. And so the role of an employee is also, like, the moment you make it harder than it needs to be for an employer, they're trying to stay afloat as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to require those skills from both sides, like the empathy and the compassion from employees as well as from employers. But we've all got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I want to thank you two fucking awesome humans.
No, thank you.
for being here. This took a lot of courage, and what you're doing takes a lot of courage. I think you're fabulous. I think that what you're doing has a really beautiful intention behind it.
Yeah.
You're not
feels good.
Yeah, it's you're not you're not doing it to like I said before, it doesn't feel like you're doing this for the wrong reasons. I feel like you're doing it, not like, who the fuck is anyone to tell you whether you're doing it for the right or the wrong reasons, but I feel that the intention behind why you're doing this is because you genuinely are interested in elevating the experience that employees have in the coffee industry. And that's noble. And it is a fuck ton of work ahead of you.
Yes.
I'm so tired.
Right. Hey, you're an entrepreneur, so welcome to my life. But having said that, I wish you the best of luck. And I think you guys are going to do great. If I can ever be of any help, please let me know. Now, the final thing before we go is I want you to plug your GoFundMe.
Oh, what is the link? Can you pull up the Instagram?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to Coffee at Large, COFFEEATLARGE, the Instagram, the link is gf.me, so GoFundMe, gf.me/u/TYG784. Oof.
Well, we will include a link in the show notes
Oh,
for all of that. But the idea was plug it. Tell us what you're going to use it for.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
Sam.
purpose of the GoFundMe is we are setting ourselves up as a nonprofit organization. We want to be able to be a support to baristas. We want to give, not just have the Instagram platform, but we also want to be able to go out on the ground floor and teach people how to work. Workers are the people running the coffee shops, so understanding what rights they have is really important.
Yeah.
And then eventually we want to also be able to educate managers and people in ownership and how to treat their people as well. So as an organization, there's a lot of work that goes into setting up a 501c3. So we are looking for someone to help us with law work, and then also have a financial advisor so that we can understand how to transparently use money, all sorts of things like that. So, and then, all sorts of things like that. So that's what the GoFundMe is for, is to be super legal and super transparent and have everything very lawful.
Yeah. We're just trying to do a good job and be intentional and do a good job.
Yeah.
Did I already say do a good
and
job?
we're baristas, so that's
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So if you are listening to this and you are, and you do have a few dollars spare, lots of people who have a couple of dollars spare really adds up. So go and support these folks and help them get what I believe is a really well-intentioned project off the ground that could really do a lot of great work for our industry. And I would encourage everybody, please start talking to each other and listening to each other.
Yeah.
That's at the core of everything, is all of us hearing each other and listening to each other and giving each other space to be heard. So thank you for coming on the podcast. And Slate, if you've been listening, the invitation's still open. I'm sure you are listening to this podcast. Come on and talk to us.
Oh, please. I would love to chat. That'd be great.
So yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for today. Have an amazing rest of your day. Peace, love, and peanut butter.
Peanut butter.
Bye, guys.